Let's get scratching.
We got an explosive broadcast coming to you. Listen up. Sega games, just keep playing them. Sega!
We're back. It's the SEGAbits Swingin Report Show live. Get ready for Sega interviews and news.
I stand still along that twilight outside of city lights.
Hello and welcome to episode 99 of the SEGAbits Swingin Report Show live. Technically it's our third live show, but 99th Swingin Report Show, and it's all happening on 9/9 at 9 p.m. That's about all the nines I've got in me. So without further ado, let's kick off the show celebrating the Sega Dreamcast's 22nd anniversary. I don't feel old. It feels like 22 years. I used to look back on the Sega Dreamcast. I'd look at the graphics and I'd be like, this is still modern. This looks cutting edge. And now I'm looking at even like at stuff like Shenmue and I'm like, man, I don't know. It does look kind of old with those blocky guys, and they're just like standing off in the distance, like washing a window for 12 hours. And at the time, we treated that like that was like a life simulation. But yeah, speaking of life simulations, The Matrix had a trailer drop today. I guess you could call it prequel era Knights of the Old Republic's getting a remake, and the Dreamcast turned 22, and those are all 1999 happenings. So I'm feeling 1999 today, and feeling it with me is our special guest. We have joining us, walking out of the green room right now, we have Big Elk. So let's bring him here. Hello.
Good to be here. I just realized there's a lot of 1999 stuff going on. I didn't even think about that. That's cool.
So you don't have to reveal it, but were you around during 1999?
Yes, I was born 10 years prior, actually. Exactly 1 week before the Genesis launched in North America.
Nice.
So I was totally aware of the Dreamcast. Unfortunately, I could not have one at the time. My parents, they put their foot down on the Dreamcast and the Saturn. Actually, couldn't have either. I got a Dreamcast now, actually, but yeah, I was totally in tune with what was going on with the Dreamcast on 9/9/99. The easiest date to remember in retro gaming history.
Yeah, I know, and it's
9/9/99.
Now, doesn't the original PlayStation share that date? Correct me if I'm wrong.
As a matter of fact, it does. In fact, I just realized I got so excited for the Dreamcast. I was told we'd be talking about Final Fantasy VIII today, because this is also the 22nd anniversary of that.
Oh my God, time does fly. Yeah, as far as me, when I was around for the Dreamcast, I was I 14 going on 15? That's got to be it, I think. And it was just a year prior to us making relatively big move. We moved an hour and a half south from where I live, but that's pretty big when you're a teenager and don't have, a car. So I left a lot of friends behind, but I took the Dreamcast with me. And to be quite honest, it was the online gameplay of Phantasy Star Online that kept me connected to some of my best friends who I left after my freshman year of high school. And that was, the Dreamcast is just a special place in my heart because of that, but also because it was really the first Sega console that I bought with my own money, actually twice. On past shows, I've told the story where I must have had the Dreamcast for maybe 6 months or 7 months, not long, and I was playing Phantasy Star Online, and there was a thunderstorm and a circuit blew or something, and it killed my Dreamcast. And if you remember, PSO was tied to your hardware, so I don't know what I did. I must have had the disk code applied to my new console, and I had to start over from scratch. I had to rebuild my girl in PSO. I always play as females in PSO. Don't tell me why.
Gosh,
and
that's a crying shame.
I love the Who's. We always called them the Hoonawurls. I'm a Hoonawurl guy, but I like their little close combat things. I like the fact that you're like looking at them from behind for like 90% of the game. Anyway, I don't want to get nasty. So I got a second Dreamcast, and it was used, and I've had that one ever since. I actually put it in a clear shell. If you remember, they sold like bootleg clear shells that now sell for hundreds. Like clear yellow is hot, hot, hot. If you're in the like Dreamcast collecting scene, everyone wants the clear yellow. I call it the piss yellow, but whatever. If people like that, they do.
I didn't know about that.
You didn't?
I know shell. Yeah, no. I know shells like that just recently launched for the Genesis, the Super Nintendo, and the PC Engine.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no idea anyone had been doing something like that for Dreamcast years ago.
Yeah, believe it or not. And I think it's coming back. I think if we're seeing Genesis now, we're going to see new Dreamcast shells. And then all those people hoarding their colored shells from like 2000 are just going to freak out. I completely skipped over it, though. Is there anything you want to like tell people, like where to find you online, what you do? I know you used to do a podcast, but right now you are not working on that. So, like, what's outside of like being on Twitter and hanging out on the Discord sometimes? What are you all about?
Well, SEGAbits fans might remember I was on the Lucky Hit podcast with some of my boys from England, like the Gaga Man and Murray Curry. Those are fine people. That podcast has been concluded. They said there was going to be a 100th episode they would cap off the series on. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. I'm not really allowed to talk about why. As for my own stuff, I had a YouTube channel, which is still up, called Elk Plays and Paints, but I wouldn't get too excited because I have not actually made a video in quite some time, and I want to do more with the channel, but right now I'm having a hard time getting that off the ground. I got other things that unfortunately took priority, so if you want to subscribe, you're more than welcome to, but like I'm not going to tell you to subscribe because like when I got nothing to sweeten the pot with.
Right.
Although
it's free to subscribe. It's not like the SEGAbits Patreon, which you can anyone watching can, but
I'm also an illustrator. That's why my name is Elk Plays and Paints, because I wanted to do some painting videos for the channel. I'm still drawing, but most of the stuff I do now, I would not recommend you show to your parents or your children. So I'm not really sure how to plug that yet. I don't even think I should. But yeah. If you're really more interested in me after this, I'll let everyone in the Sega podcast Discord, SEGAbits Discord, sorry. I'll let them know when I have something to share.
Sounds good. And speaking of sharing, I actually wanted to do a little show and tell here before we get into the main event. So I know you brought something, so why don't you show this off? It's a fun little piece. Brings back a lot of memories for me. So tell the folks who can't see, like the people without eyes, or the people listening, what you are holding up right now.
This is is it 0 or 1? It's issue 1 of the official Dreamcast magazine. This is how I first learned about the Dreamcast, and it's the only issue of this magazine I ever had. In fact, I don't know how, but I somehow wound up with 2 copies of it. And you know what? I have something else I can share with you. I almost forgot about it, but it's right next to me. I'll go get it.
Okay. So as he gets it, we have Arthur Lee Brown with a comment saying, "My Dreamcast broke when my cousin dropped it."
Okay. I got one other thing, not really related to the launch, but just to show people I'm still collecting for Dreamcast. This is Xeno Cider. It's a new indie Dreamcast release, which I believe came out late last year, actually. I actually pre-ordered this years ago and completely forgot about that. And then they finally mailed it to me.
Well, at least they mailed it to you, unlike Elysian Shadows. But yeah, Xenocider. It makes me think. So like it makes me think of a joke I just made up. So what do the creatures in the movie Alien enjoy drinking when they go out for the fall apple picking?
Apple Xenocider.
No, Xenocider. Yeah, Xenocider. Okay. Anyway, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I was a subscriber to the official Dreamcast magazine. That is what I think kind of not only made me more of a hardcore fan of the Dreamcast, but kept me going as a fan, because what I love about the official Dreamcast magazine is, unlike Sega Visions, which people talk a lot of. I mean, I don't talk about it too much, not as much as Nintendo Power, but I always felt like Sega Visions was not that great of a magazine because it was it was an internal magazine from Sega, so it was really just like an advertising piece. Now, whereas
I know
the official,
what you mean. I used to subscribe to the official US PlayStation magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I always liked that magazine, but that was also a bit of an advertising piece. I'm going to tell you right now, because I reread a few old issues of it just recently.
Right.
And like even then, they even talked about like other things outside of PlayStation. Like they did music reviews, and then when the PlayStation 2 was coming out, they started talking about DVD movies as well. And not just like Sony Pictures DVDs. They talked about all kinds of DVDs.
Oh my God. I remember when they would put plays on PlayStation 2 stickers on DVDs. Like, yeah, they all do. You know, you could put plays on Sega Dreamcast stickers on every audio CD. But yeah, the official Dreamcast magazine.
Right. They did do that.
They did. What I love about it, or what I loved about it, it ended after 12 issues, was that it was licensed, but they gave the editorial team like premiere access. But they never really, I never got the vibe that they told them, hey, if you write negatively, we're going to pull your access or we're going to revoke it. So it seems like the official Dreamcast magazine wrote very fairly about the Sega Dreamcast, but you never would read an article where they would say, like, I don't know why Sega's doing this, or here's a terrible decision they're making. Instead, because they had the access, they would say, well, Sega's making this decision that we believe might be kind of bad, but we reached out to them and here's what they told us. So it's always like that next level of journalism that you got from them. I believe it was Simon Cox, Francesca Reyes, just a fantastic editorial team who really went on to kind of, in the early days of SEGAbits, be friends to the site. George and I, on the 50th episode of Swingin' Report Show, we had a reunion of the editor-in-chief and one of the head writers of the magazine, and it was really the first time they spoke in years. They got really in-depth with how the magazine functioned, how they worked with Sega. They revealed what they would have reviewed, some games that they never got to, things like that. So that's definitely a must-listen if you're a Dreamcast fan. And I have nothing but great memories of official Dreamcast magazine. And I think on a future Sega Talk, maybe the next one after the one I do with George, I don't know. I really want to do the demo discs. And that sounds weird, but there is so much fun and bizarre content in those that you can't get anywhere else unless you're burning discs or something like that. So let me get to my show and tell, and this is how high-tech it is over here. We're going to switch to camera 2. There we go, camera 2. So as I shift over, so I've got a few things over here. First up, I have an issue of Game Fan magazine that I got after just a few days ago, actually. One of those like fan Twitter accounts that just posts magazine scans, they shared this. I immediately jumped on eBay, put a reminder. It popped up like 3 or 4 days ago, and they shipped it to me. It just arrived. This is awesome. Like, I love the art. I love when magazines
really
try to
hyping us up
emulate.
here.
What's that?
You're really hyping us up here.
Well, I mean, I mean, if you can't see it at home, it's basically the cover art to Knuckles Chaotix 32X. There's tons of purple on the cover, purple and green, which just looks so retro. I love it. And then it's got the character from Game Fan, which is like a TV head guy with muscles standing in the background, but it's a recreation of the title screen in like airbrushed art. And inside there is actually a very lengthy like 32x section. And I don't know if this is like original art, but it's like this really wild Knuckles who almost looks like he's from Sonic Adventure, where it's like, if you remember when Shadow was first being revealed, they kind of put the sprite in like, or not the sprite, the render in like Shadow. And it just looks like a very dark Knuckles. It's kind of cool. And then there's also Eggman art, which I'll show in front of the camera here too, where he's like doing a peace move. And I've never seen this art before. I think I've seen that one. These might be European art. I'm not sure. But that was just a cool thing. And then this, I don't want to like, take up the entire show, but this is kind of cool. So this is a box of Sega Genesis games that I got from a friend of mine who owns a bar in downtown Chicago. That's where we met. And he gave me like all of his childhood games just for free. So I've got John Madden, Football 92. This is my first time looking at these. I've got NHL 96, lots of sports games. FIFA 96, soccer. Oh boy, kids, it's Pat Riley, basketball. And then,
Oh my God, Pat Riley.
yeah, right? Madden 94.
I know who that is.
What's kind of fun about this, though, is I would never buy these. And so it's actually kind of cool to receive a bunch of sports games for free because, like NHL 94. But then what I'm seeing here is, like World Championship Soccer. Okay, we're getting into the sports stuff, but now we're moving out of it because look what's in there. We got some real gems. We have Truxton, which, and I'm not going to like be all like, oh, this is rare, but, oh, this is rare. Then we've got a classic, Sonic 2. This would be my second or third copy I own of the game. We have Miss Pac-Man. And then we've got a classic. We have Columns. And then I'm kind of running out of room on the table here, taking everything out. Maximum Carnage. And then finally, I think this is finally, Pitfall. And then, and then Altered Beast. And I think he got this packed in with the console because inside is actually his original Genesis. I'm not going to take it out, but it's like, and then I got this like third-party Naki pad. So it's always a treat to not only like receive a little gift from someone like that, but then to also kind of get a look at their childhood just by taking a look at the lineup they get. I mean, obviously a sports fan, but then, like what kid in the era would not want like Maximum Carnage,
I remember I wanted Maximum Carnage. Not so much today though. But like that's another of those games where even if I wanted it, I couldn't really have it as a kid.
Red
Also,
cartridge,
the cover
though.
art kind of, I thought that was a bit scary at the time. I was kind of a pansy when I was a little kid.
They're gonna make them. They have the movie coming out, right? Like Let There Be Carnage or whatever. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So, but now let's get into the main event. So I'm gonna switch us over to a slideshow view. So you sent me this image, and I'll bring it up here on the. It says, "Get in, loser." We're going to cast some dreams.
We're going to cast some dreams. Yeah, this is a meme from my personal collection on my computer. I think I discovered that 2 years ago, and I just like to bring it up every time the Dreamcast anniversary comes up in any region.
It's
cool.
Cause,
that's the only reason I wanted you to show it to people.
Well, they drove this like mobile assault vehicle around the country too, showing the Dreamcast off. I think it appeared at events with like Fred Durst.
Yeah,
he was actually
Fred Durst and Limp Bizkit. We all know they were repping the Dreamcast back then, weren't they?
Absolutely, and there was a little Twitter exchange between SEGAbits and some other account where The Rock has promoted every console of like that era. He was promoting Xbox, Dreamcast, PS2, GameCube. Like he's such a whore. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I actually didn't know that. I remember him at the Xbox conference.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him at a bunch of in a bunch of print ads for wrestling games, whichever wrestling league he was in, I forget. I think it was just WWF.
I'll be honest, I never watched wrestling as a kid. I never understood it. I was like, oh, it's fake? Well, then why am I watching it?
I watched it in the early to mid 90s, and I kind of fell out of it after that. I kind of want to get back into it again now that people are getting so hyped over AEW, especially when what's his name? CM Punk. CM Punk joined them.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of starting to feel the excitement for AEW, even though I haven't even watched a single AEW event yet.
Well, the great thing is there are wrestling games on the Dreamcast, and they're actually pretty fun, and there's some really wild character customizations.
I actually remember I played the arcade version of WWF Attitude, I think it was. I remember that was a Dreamcast game, and then Sega actually made an arcade version for their Naomi hardware.
Yeah, it's wild. But hey, wrestling, it's big. And we have Daniel Matthew here in the comments asking a question. He says, hey, I have a question. Of course you do. Do you have Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2? Well, funny you should ask, because my next slide is actually a photo I just took of my Dreamcast shelf. So,
by the way, I
yes.
can't actually see the YouTube video, so I didn't know you were taking slides earlier when I joked about you hyping up that magazine. So I just now realized that's what you're doing, because you did it on the last video, so I'm sorry about that.
No, it's not a problem. Yeah, you know, it's this software is not 100% perfect, but it's, hey, the viewers at home are loving it. So this photo I took, I actually just took this. This is my Dreamcast collection. It has not actually grown in a number of years. As viewers can see here, I have on the top shelf my Japanese titles, my European titles. It's kind of being blocked by some Shenmue and Space Channel 5 VR packaging from limited run games. But then I actually, at one point, from seeing other collections, I took my white label games and my black label games and I separated them, and it looks so much better because you get, not only do you kind of get a sense of what the early and the later games are, but it just looks nicer. After that, I have the orange label, which were the Sega All-Stars releases, which, yeah, that's, I think, one of the earlier uses of that term before it became like a iToy. That was Superstars, and then it became the All-Stars Racing series. And then on the bottom shelf, I have a lot of indie titles, and then some Nintendo DS stuff, but let's ignore that.
You know what I think is amazing about Dreamcast?
Mm-hmm.
This system was only on the market, at least in North America, for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, I'm actually kind of amazed that they actually had a period where they changed the packaging, and they had like a greatest hits thing for their best-selling games when they got reprinted.
Yeah, but it was so. I think it was really a reaction to PlayStation 2.
It's possible. You know what? Maybe that's it. I hadn't thought of that. Because, like, I'm remembering most other consoles that did this. When the Genesis went from the grid to the red stripe on the left,
right,
that took them, I think, 3 or 4 years to do that.
Yes.
And it took Nintendo, when Nintendo does their Player's Choice series,
mm-hmm.
they usually wait until the console's on its way out before they start introducing that.
Yeah,
and then sometimes they even do games under that label after the successor to that console is already out. So, like, when the Wii U was already out, that's when they started doing a Player's Choice re-release of some Wii games, like Super Mario Galaxy 2.
Right, yeah, and it's, I mean, I kind of like when it's just uniform throughout the entire life of the console, and for something like the Dreamcast, where it was a short, I guess, 18 months in the US, it is kind of sudden to change that. But I understand they were trying to make it look a little more adult with the PlayStation 2. I also prefer the black label. I think it looks classier. I think the white label, I don't like the like bevel and embossed little like triangle they did. I think it looks dated with the drop shadow.
I actually prefer that.
Oh, you
But,
do?
yeah.
Well, we
But,
can't agree
it's
on
apples and
everything.
oranges, right?
I do have a question here from Islander Soda in the comments. Is the the Sonic Adventure cover is awesome. But then what was also said was, where did that Shenmue 3 case come from? That was from the Limited Run Games box. And it's just a case, but it looks like, obviously, a Dreamcast case for Shenmue 3. And they did it again with Space Channel 5 VR. And so whenever they do that, they've got my money. The Grandia in the picture is actually what was used at EB Games on the shelf so that they wouldn't have the actual game out there. And off camera, you can kind of see it up in the corner, is a massive Sonic Shuffle box that's like the size of a pizza box. And I don't know where they put these things, but I remember when the Dreamcast was on the way out, I asked this guy at the store, like, hey, can I have that? And he was like, yeah, sure. I'll do one more question here. Daniel Matthews says, what do you think is better, SA1 or SA2? I like them both. I think I can't really pick one over the other, but if you were to hold me at light gun point, I would say Sonic Adventure 1 because it's more fun to goof around in after you complete the main game. So without further ado now, let's get into the main event. So what I plan to do on this show is to have us go through and name our top 5 moments, memories, games, and then combined it would be a top 10. Now, for those who are longtime watchers, George may or may not join us. He has his own 5 that he might run through at the end. But if he doesn't, we'll keep this at 10. It could be 15. I don't know. But it's just a fun little way to look back on the days of yore. So first off, we're going to kick off with my number 1, and then we'll jump over to you, Elk, and we can do a little ping pong back and forth. So for me, this is a weird one. So you might look at this and go, oh, you remember the controller. Well, actually, for me, my Dreamcast launch memory was trying to figure out how the Dreamcast worked. Because I was a kid going from the Genesis, which was a console that Tom Kalinske, rightfully so, said, has a long shelf life and could have been there much longer without the Saturn coming out. So I went from the Saturn to the Dreamcast. So for me, I was going from cartridge to disc, memory cards, internet cables. I was 14 at the time. I didn't really understand all this stuff. So when I went to the store and got my Dreamcast, I got the Dreamcast and I went home. Played Sonic Adventure. How do I save this thing? I don't know. Oh, you need a memory card? I thought it saved it inside. There has to be memory inside. This thing's, it's pretty heavy. No. So I had to run back to the store, get a memory card, but they were kind of difficult to come across. So I went a good week without a memory card playing Sonic Adventure, and I'd play it up to a point where I could play no more, turn it off. It was a sad state.
I can't imagine going through that. I grew up with the PlayStation 1, so I always somehow understood that. Well, I guess the Saturn did this differently, but with disc-based consoles, they couldn't save on the system or the disc. So I was used to having to get memory cards, and even the Nintendo 64 needed that for some games. But yeah, I never really thought about that. Where at the time it was a new concept, and yet I was able to understand it immediately. But not everyone was able to get that, were they?
No.
In your case, you had to find out the hard way.
As
That's
evidenced,
nuts.
yeah. And and you make a great point there too, because even if I was a Saturn owner, I would have thought that there was some internal memory, that I could save my Dreamcast files somehow.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that if you did have a Saturn growing up, I suppose. Or even a Sega CD. I think the Sega CD did that too.
Well, yeah, it did, and I had friends who owned Sega CDs, and I think I might have had a friend who owned a Saturn. So right there, I would see that there was a save system going on inside the console. And honestly, looking back, I totally think Sega could have built the equivalent of one VMU at the very least, inside.
They could have.
They could
I'm
have, but they
guessing
didn't
it was
because...
a cost-cutting... I'm guessing it was a cost-cutting issue, yeah.
Or it was a
like,
money-making issue.
Yeah, or that too. Because, like, they had to make sure they got the modem in there so, like, everyone could connect online, even if the online service wasn't immediately available in September of that year.
Right. Yeah. So
Or,
what...
like, there were no games that... Well, I guess Sonic Adventure did. I'm rambling at this point.
No, that's totally cool. I want to hear your pick. So what's your number? I guess we'll call this number 2. Elk number 1, 10 number 2.
Okay, so you talked about a memory, so I have a memory. Like I said, I didn't have a Dreamcast back then. I wanted one really badly, just like I wanted a Saturn. My parents at the time, they were kind of against Sega for some reason to a point. Like, they got me a Game Gear, they got me a few Sega games on PC, and at one point they did actually buy me a Genesis, but for some strange reason they couldn't connect the Genesis to the TV, so then they sent it back to the store along with all the games the very next day, and I cried the whole night. I was so sad. I'm guessing... I like to think sometimes that maybe they foresaw the eventual collapse of the Saturn and the Dreamcast and decided neither was worth investing money in the long run.
Right.
Recently, I remembered what happened with that Genesis, and I thought maybe they somehow believed that the Sega was harder to hook up than Nintendo or PlayStation, because they had no trouble connecting my other consoles to the TV. And I was a little kid, so I didn't know how this worked yet. So I don't know what went wrong.
Right.
But yeah, so I could only look at Dreamcast from the outside in at the time. But I do have some very interesting memories. So, like, before the Dreamcast came out, I remember I went to an electronic boutique store once. And I don't know how long ago this was before the launch of the Dreamcast. I just know this was before. They were demoing a Japanese Dreamcast along with a Japanese version of Sonic Adventure and Marvel vs. Capcom. So there was a store employee who was walking me through a bit of Sonic Adventure. I was playing through Sonic's story. I got through the Emerald Coast level, so I got to experience. I got to play through that whole thing. That was when my jaw hit the floor when I saw the whale chase. Everyone knows that. Yeah. And near the end, where he's running along that last stretch to where Tails is, where all the dolphins jump out of the air. And I remember being so amazed by that. And then at the same time, the cutscene that came right after, I was like floored in like the opposite way by seeing how bizarre the character animations were. I remember when Tails shows Sonic the Chaos Emerald, and he's like, "Whoa, that's a Chaos Emerald!" I just burst out laughing,
right?
Especially because this was the Japanese version, so I didn't actually know what they were talking about. And then, like right after that, I got to play up to the Egg Hornet boss that comes afterwards. When you're supposed to go to the Mystic Ruins, you find Eggman there, and then he shows up in his robot. So I beat that, and then I saw Chaos in the cutscene that comes right after. So he tosses the Chaos Emerald at Chaos. He gets bigger, and like and again, this is Japanese, so I don't actually know what's going on.
Right.
But like I was like so mystified by this new character that I'd never seen before, Chaos, and it just made me more and more curious about the game moving forward, because there was a whole air of mystery that really caught my attention.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then of course I played Marvel vs. Capcom. Not much to say about that one, but I just remember it. Since this was the Japanese version, Mega Man was called Rockman. And like I remember being confused, and the employee just telling me that's what they call Mega Man in Japan. So I thought, oh, okay, all right, whatever. And then War Machine. I'd never heard of War Machine at the time, but he looked like Iron Man, so I I assume Japan called Iron Man War Machine for some reason.
I'd have to say, going back to Sonic Adventure, and I'm actually going to share number 3 for me in R10 is Sonic Adventure. That is a game I have very fond memories of. I think it's really the last Sonic game I played where like you said, you play that first level and you're just like jaw on the floor. Wow, you're like, look at this beach, I can run around. This whale, this is insane. And there were those weird little quirks, like you're mentioning when Eggman throws the Chaos Emerald, and I don't remember the animation exactly, but if you're watching us on camera, he's like, it's not even that. It's like it kind of floats out of his. It's
yeah,
not great.
I think he doesn't even move his hand like he's tossing it anywhere, if I'm remembering this correctly.
Right, it's like this. It's like it just kind of goes. He's like, ah! But there's something really special there because, I mean, sure, the graphics, like the animation was not really up to par because if you remember, Toy Story was 1995. So it's not like this is like eye-popping 3D graphics when it came to the cutscenes. But
right,
yeah,
and
it's just...
like I remember some Call Me Johnny talked about this before, but like the Crash Bandicoot games, even though the Dreamcast was twice as powerful as the PlayStation, Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, those games had they had much more animation going on in their cutscenes. Like they had mouths on the characters moving in ways that made sense. They were actually able to contort the faces in ways that showed genuine emotion when needed. And Sonic Adventure couldn't do that. Like, I mean, the rest of the game was still amazing, so like the cutscenes were whatever. It's fun to laugh at least.
I mean, yeah, and there are funny moments, but at the same time, you were seeing a 2D character for the first time in 3D, talking, interacting. You were getting so much more through the cutscenes than you really did on the Genesis, and this is, during a time when that was fun and new. Now we're at a point where when Sonic Mania came out, people were like, "Oh my God, this is so cool! Cutscenes without dialogue. Wow, how novel!"
You bring up a good point, because I remember feeling that same way seeing Sonic in Sonic Adventure for the first time as I did when I saw Super Mario 64 for the first time. Because that game didn't really have cutscenes, I guess. But just the novelty of finally seeing Mario in full 3D and like all the different moves that you could do with him, that was beyond mind-boggling at the time. Also kind of scary because I was still getting used to 3D, so everything in that game terrified me at the time. Thankfully I got over that by the time Sonic Adventure dropped.
So, what is your next memory? Kicking it back to you for number 4. Game, memory, anything.
Alright, so unfortunately, I don't have too many memories of the Dreamcast back when it was still commercially relevant. Mm-hmm. But I do have a really interesting memory of how I got my Dreamcast eventually. So I think you reported this. You remember back in 2009 when ThinkGeek.com came across a whole warehouse chock full of Dreamcast units that never made it into retail? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for those who don't know, you're probably not that familiar with ThinkGeek.com anyway, because ever since they were bought out by GameStop, they kind of fell out of the limelight a bit. But basically, at the time, they were an online retailer with a bunch of geek-related novelties. Mm-hmm. And at some point in that year, 2009, they did come across a warehouse full of Dreamcast units. I don't know how. But when that happened, they sold each one on their website for $99 each.
Wow.
And I bought one of them. So you end up with a random bundle when you bought them. You just pick between a white Dreamcast and a black Dreamcast. And in North America, the only black one we had was the Sega Sports one, so I went with the white one. And I ended up with a Sega Sports bundle, which included NFL, NBA, and World Series Baseball 2K. Mm-hmm. All of which I've never actually opened. So no disrespect to anyone who loves those games, because I know they were exceptional sports games, but that's not why I got my Dreamcast, and I'm pretty sure I'm not in the minority there anyway. Or yeah, I got minority right. So yeah, the way I got my Dreamcast was exceptionally cool, because even though I missed out on it when it first came out, I still got to have that experience of getting a brand new Dreamcast and then taking it out of the box, having everything there. And then and this time I actually knew how game systems hooked up to TVs, so I could actually hook it up to on my own this time.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually so excited that I filmed a video of it, which I uploaded to YouTube. And it is actually still there. I used to have another channel called Elk 810, Elk 810, which, so if you're curious, you can actually go there and you can check my video where I opened the Dreamcast. Unfortunately, I was still learning video editing at the time, and I found this cell shading filter in Sony Vegas, so I did the whole video in that cell shaded filter, just because Jet Set Radio looked like that, and
right.
it looks ugly as hell when I remember it. But thankfully, I actually found the original camera I used, which had all the raw video footage. So maybe one of these days I'll remake that video just to have it without the ugly cell shading filter.
Go for it.
But yeah. But
nice.
Yeah,
that's great. I mean, even if it wasn't happening like at the time, it's still really cool that you were given that memory years later. I mean, I wish I could have had that with like the Saturn, which I believe I picked up in '99 used. I don't really have any memory outside of just buying it used and taking it home and plugging it in. There was no real unboxing and unveiling and seeing all those little loose papers. Those are so fun. For me, for my next pick, number 5, it's little. So let's see how little it is. So we've got Vern Troyer, and I bring this up because Vern Troyer, a little person actor who passed away, I think like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. He played Mini-Me in the Austin Powers movies. I don't know why, but he was there for both the American and European Dreamcast launch. So Sega saw fit not only they must have flown him out then, because I get like the American one, it might have been in LA or New York where he was at the time, so it was very easy to get these celebrities. Now, I mean, Sega, they've always made interesting, sometimes strange, sometimes bad choices when it comes to people appearing at console launches. Infamously, the former president was at the Genesis launch, which I'm sure Tom Kalinske now greatly wishes never happened, but he wasn't CEO at the time, so what can he do? But like Vern Troyer, he was there. He must have been a gamer. He must have enjoyed it. He loved his wine, because a lot of the pictures out there are him just drinking and hanging out and playing Dreamcast. But I don't know. I just think like what a legend to to claim the fame of being at not 1 but 2 Dreamcast launches. I don't think that many people can claim that. And he seems like a fan. Like maybe there was a paycheck involved, but he looks to be having fun. I love the photo of I believe that's another celebrity selling what was probably the first Dreamcast of the night to this guy who's just like losing it. What do you think of that?
I do remember Vern Troyer being quite a gamer, so I'm pretty sure he definitely had a legitimate love for the Dreamcast and whatever other games he was shilling, if any.
Well, Gary Coleman loved video gaming too, and he was really into, I think, N64. He was actually selling a lot of his gaming stuff on eBay a couple of years before he passed away, probably to raise money for like hospital bills or whatever he had going on. But I also remember in downtown Chicago at the Museum of Broadcast, Radio and Broadcast Communications, they had Gary Coleman's like N64 on display, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But what I really wanted, and I almost bid on it. I don't know if it was another console or that same one, but it was like the memory cards were there. So if you can imagine, you could buy like a role-playing game and pick up from a save file that Gary Coleman had, and it might say Gary. I don't know. I think that's kind of fun.
Oh, that's interesting. I remember there were a lot of rappers who also used to love the Dreamcast.
Yes.
And then a lot of them latched onto the PlayStation 2, of course. So like I remember a Ludacris song where he brought up the PlayStation 2.
And
I don't know if they brought up. I don't know if any of them brought up Dreamcast in their music, but like I remember there was a Cribs episode where another rapper, I forget who, he was showing off this home theater setup he's got, and like he had the Dreamcast. He was playing one of the NFL 2K games on it.
Yes.
I remember he said it ain't no home if you ain't got Dreamcast, which I 100% agree with. And you know how there's a photo of Tupac and Suge Knight playing Sonic 2?
Yeah.
I honestly would not be surprised if there was a photo of like Eminem and Dre or DMX playing like Soul Calibur or something.
And in our comments, we have Gaming with True commenting, and this is what was at kind of the front of my mind, but I couldn't place who it was. Redman from Method Man and Redman did an MTV's Cribs where he had a Dreamcast, but his apartment was, I don't want to say it was shit, but it was shit for someone who would be on MTV Cribs. And years later, they did a follow-up, and he still had it. Like,
yeah, it was Method Man, right? Or was it Redman? He said.
I think it was Redman. Honestly, I can't.
That was another name.
I don't know my Method Man from my Redman,
but it was escaping me.
Yeah.
That's another name that was escaping me that I was trying to remember when it came to rappers who liked the Dreamcast. But it definitely wasn't just Fred Durst.
No, and I know you mentioned when you got your console years later, it came with some sports games. I mean, as time goes on, sports games become less and less important or relevant to a console. I mean, as evidenced when I unboxed that Sega Genesis earlier and I had all these sports games. Like now, those are kind of like undesirable games. But at the time, they're really system sellers. And with the Dreamcast, the big deal was that NFL 2K was online. And
it was.
on our Sega Talk Xbox episode where we ran through that internal document from a SegaNet and Microsoft meeting about SegaNet, one of the things they brought up is that you don't need to push a ton of online games. You just need like one really good one like PSO and like a sports game. And thankfully Sega, they went above and beyond and they had many more than just two. But it just goes to show you how important it was to at least have one sports game, and in the case of the Dreamcast, online gameplay, which really became, moving forward, like you would never see in 2020 or 2021 a sports game come out that didn't have online play. If it didn't have it, you might as well not release it. And
that's a good
yeah. And I think console makers too, they realize that there is within the rap and hip hop community, there is this tendency to want to play the latest sports games. So if you already have built-in pitchmen there to promote your stuff, probably for free as long as you're giving them the latest console and all the accessories. And what's that to you? Like a couple $100 for some publicity, have them show up and be like, yeah, we'll give you Dreamcast games for life. Little did they know that they were going to get it for like a year. So honestly,
I remember like it wasn't just the Dreamcast. Like there was a lot of rappers over the years who really loved, pretty much. They also loved the Genesis. Like even years later, I used to listen to this obscure rapper from England named Lady Sovereign. And I remember she did a song called "Those Were the Days," where she reminisces about stuff from her youth. And one of the things she brought up was playing Mortal Kombat on the Sega. I assume she means Mega Drive.
Yeah, that's always strange when they just use the blanket Sega, and then you have to like play the game of what year was this? What game could it possibly be?
Right, because Saturn and all the all the Sega consoles except the Master System had a Mortal Kombat game, didn't they? Even the Game Gear had some.
That is true. So, what would your sixth pick be in this 10 count up?
Like I said, I don't have that many memories, but I do want to talk a bit about the commercials for the Dreamcast, especially the early ones.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a particular name for these, but there's the most of us know the ones where you look inside the Dreamcast and you see all the characters just doing their thing inside. Those are still my favorite game commercials of all time. Nothing's topped that, at least as far as TV commercials. The only thing that's ever come closest would be that Sonic Mania trailer where they parodied the Genesis commercial where a salesman is trying to sell a guy in first person on the Super Nintendo, and they just get more and more enamored with the Genesis and buy that instead. So they did that, but with Sonic Mania.
Those were really epic commercials just because not only did they like do this cool thing where they take you inside the Dreamcast, but they would show you characters from games who you might not be seeing for months, if not years. I know the Floygan brothers appeared in some of the earliest ads. The Floygan brothers did not release until the end of the console. So you're getting a look at characters in 1999 who you will not be seeing until 2001. And I actually, here, let me do a little screen share now. Sharing videos here, the audio's cool. Sometimes the video can be a little stuttery. But let's just take a look at the intro to one of these commercials. So we're flying inside the Dreamcast. We're seeing all these crazy characters inside.
I know this one already.
And then the guy's looking inside doing like the DreamWorks face with the arched eyebrow. And then Tails gets told to shut up by a basketball player. So, you know, it's...
He calls him a quadruped, which I didn't know what that meant at the time, but knowing what it means now, if you don't know, quadruped is a word for a creature that has to walk on all four legs, which Tails doesn't need to do that. A real fox needs to do that, but not Tails.
Yeah, but yeah, those are classic commercials, and I'm going to bring it even further back. So for my seventh pick, I am going to talk about the Dreamcast launch commercial, and how fitting too. We were talking about the Matrix trailer, Matrix 4 coming out today. This ad is so Matrixy. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but let's just kick it right off here. We'll be up in the little corner, like Japanese television, commentating on it. So here we go. So we've got this woman hiding on the ceiling who has PlayStation controller on her arm, so she's clearly working for Sony, and she's breaking into a like Dreamcast facility, running down a hallway, and you got the Sega swirls all over the walls. She jumps out into the city. I guess it's Japan, who knows? And she's being chased by, like, I guess, drones, security cameras, police officers, whatever. And she's being tracked by a bunch of dudes. And then, wow, an airplane smashes into a radio antenna, which is something... Yeah. It's wild. And this whole ad, it's a minute and a half long. Now we've got, like, a Fast and Furious kid cruising down the street in his car. He almost hits this woman on her motorcycle. No, he hits her. And then she smashes onto a cop car, drops her Dreamcast. The cops get her. and then inside is Sonic the Hedgehog and all the characters who were working from inside the Dreamcast to arrest this woman. And, you know, like I said, this was the launch trailer, so this is really what kicked off that whole series of ads that you talked about.
Right. I still remember that whole commercial, and most of these commercials, I recall, I saw them on Fox when I was watching new episodes of, like, Simpsons and King of the Hill. And even though this particular commercial is not part of the commercials we're talking about, I remember one time I was videotaping The Simpsons, and I had to stop the tape whenever the commercials came up. And on one of the commercial breaks, the immediate first commercial was a commercial for Shenmue. It was there's a voice that's pretending to be Ryo Hazuki. My name is Ryo Hazuki. My father was killed by Lon D. I have to find out who killed him while playing billiards and managing my association with Nozomi. And then it cuts to a guy in a mental ward.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you let me go, I wish to resume my journey. It's like he clearly doesn't realize who he is. So as soon as that commercial came up and I realized it was Shenmue, I didn't stop the tape. I just let it keep going because I wanted to record that commercial.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember that one too, and it was very in line with kind of the Sega of America ads at the time.
Yeah, they were still using the Sega Scream from the Genesis years.
That's right. Yeah, they were using that well into the Dreamcast. I think they used it for everything from the Genesis through to the Dreamcast. And yeah, it was a fantastic series of ads. I don't think it's ever been, in my opinion, topped. I love the idea. Like, it makes so much sense. It's the Dreamcast inside contains all of your favorite characters and games. Here they are all together, and you get to see these just like great ads of them all interacting. You get cameos. It's honestly some of the greatest like video game crossovers you're going to get until, you know, I have the poster behind me. Wreck-It Ralph came out. Yeah,
it was the Dreamcast family, right? And like, even if you like weren't into Sega, like you probably recognize a character or two. Like I remember Rayman, in some of those commercials. People might have remembered Rayman from like the PlayStation or like the Nintendo 64 if they played Rayman 2. And so you know that Rayman is going to be on the Dreamcast, at least Rayman 2 anyway. And then you not only that, but you have these characters interacting with real sports athletes. So it was really cool seeing them all come together like that. And I wish they did that for like the remainder of the Dreamcast life eventually they switched to more traditional commercials like the Shenmue one, even though I still love those too.
That kind of happened, I think, with the packaging change to the black labels. I feel like there was a whole marketing shakeup because they were losing ground. And I mean, I've worked in marketing for well over a decade now, and I know full well that as soon as you see the numbers slipping, you have to react fast or you're going to lose. And
that
more
makes
often
sense.
than not,
I never thought of that.
Yeah, and more often than not, when we pivot in marketing, we see, if we have the right people on our team, we see results. So, you know, I don't blame them for what they did. It would have been cool to have it carry through the whole console life and like have a final It's Thinking commercial inside, just like how Sega to Sanshiro carried through the life of the Saturn, and we got that epic finale video of him saving Sega to save the Dreamcast, but killing himself, and then years later he comes back with his son. So moving down, moving up, down.
Oh, sorry.
I want to hear your 8th pick.
Jeez. Let me see if I could scrape the bottom of the barrel in my mind for something, because I'm trying to think of stuff from like when the Dreamcast was still commercially relevant.
How about a game? Give me a game.
All right, you know what? The fighting games.
Yes.
Because even though I didn't have a Dreamcast, all my gamer friends had one. at least the hardcore gamers, they all had one. And you know what they loved most about it? All except for one of them, I guess, was they loved the fighting games, especially the Capcom ones.
Yep.
They played Marvel vs. Capcom 1 and 2. They played, what else did they play? Actually, I think it was just those two. Those were the ones everyone was hyped for. Maybe maybe a few of them played Soul Calibur, but it wasn't really that popular among my personal circle of friends as you might think it was.
Right.
So like that's what we all knew the Dreamcast for at the time was like fighting games. Street Fighter Alpha 3. That was another one I was trying to remember they played.
Yes.
So yeah, Street Fighter and Marvel vs. Capcom, that's what everyone knew.
And there were some fantastic fighters at launch. You had, I believe Dead or Alive 2 was a launch title. There was
so
Power
was Marvel
Stone
vs. Capcom.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at the magazine here, so they went over the games that it launched with. It actually also launched with King of Fighters Dream Match 99, which is actually a port of the King of Fighters 98, which is one of the fan favorite King of Fighters games anyway. And I know people particularly love the Dreamcast version of it. It launched with Power Stone. That was the other one everyone was playing. I almost forgot about that.
Yeah, I love Power Stone. Honestly, if you were to tell me, you can only have one Dreamcast game to play for a week, and you can play with your friends, that's the only rule. Power Stone 2, hands down, would be the game I would pick, because I have spent so many memorable hours with 3 other friends playing the 4-player. We would always, one of us would have a completed save file, so you would get all the maps. My favorite map was actually, it was just a cube level. It was just a bunch of cubes, but there was so much it sounds stupid now, but it was just so fun to go up on top of the cubes and go down below. There was just all these little levels, and I guess the best comparison I could make was with how Smash Brothers fans will love a map just because it works so well to make a fun fighting environment. It might not be the most exciting location, but just the layout works so well.
Yeah, I mean, we Smash Brothers fans do have stages like that. We've always loved Hyrule Temple since Melee, for one. So Power Stone, I know there's a few stages. I can't remember much about them off the top of my head because I never got to play the first Power Stone very much. I've mostly been able to play Power Stone 2 because that one I'd actually seen in arcades a few times. And I think one of my friends had Power Stone 2 as well. So that, I think I only got to play the first Power Stone 2 or 3 times because only, my friends had that. Only one of them I ever got to play that game with.
Nice. Well, I think fighting games is an apt pick too, because the next Sega Talk podcast will be covering Marvel vs. Capcom 2. George is going to be the host. We are actually putting the call out for memories right now on our Patreon. So if you're a Patreon supporter at any level, you can have your memories read at the end. And so I'm looking forward to doing that one because it's a game I own, but it's not a game I'm very well versed in, the history of. And I'm looking forward to diving in with that with George.
So am I.
So that'll be fun. And
I won't be there, but I'm looking forward to listening.
It's going to be a fun one. I always like the ones where we skip the first game and we just move on to the sequel. Says a lot about how...
The second one is easily the more notable of the two.
Absolutely.
I do personally love the first one, but there was a lot more going on to the second one. Plus, it was made for Sega hardware, whereas the first one, that was a port from the Capcom PlaySystem 2 system. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was made for Naomi, which itself is based on Dreamcast hardware.
Right. Yeah, and so my 9th pick is kind of a weird one. So we are going to be talking about a demo disc, but not just any demo disc. We're talking about the Generator, and I'm doing this a little old school. So we're taking a look at the Sega Retro page here. I don't know how I can do this so it can look good. But basically what you can see here is the demo disc artwork. And this is the disc that shipped with the Dreamcast. And so most everyone had this one. It had, there we go, we can see a beautiful picture of it here. It had Ready to Rumble Boxing, Power Stone, Monaco Grand Prix, House of the Dead 2, Sonic Adventure, Sega Bass Fishing, Champ Car Racing, Flag to Flag, and more. And
I believe... Oh, wait, no, I didn't have this one.
No.
My Dreamcast came with the second volume.
That's right.
Dreamcast generator.
That's right.
I remember, because that one also had Sonic Adventure, but it had one of the Tomb Raider games on it as well. And I think Rayman 2.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, so the Dreamcast Generator Volume 2 did come later in the console's life, towards the end. So they did at least manage to eke out 2 of them. But this one, I feel like kind of stands above that second one just because of the games that are included. For me, too, I always kind of treated this as my copy of some of these games that I didn't end up ever owning. So like if I wanted to get a taste of the game but not play the whole thing, obviously that's what a demo's for. But for some of these games, it gave me enough of a taste and I was like, I'm good. I don't need to. And I guess that's kind of a demo failing to do what it needs to do, is to sell you on the game. I always found, though, Ready to Rumble Boxing, I was so amazed by the like jiggly fat and muscles of the boxers. Like it would kind of move on their bones. It was really kind of impressive.
I remember that too. I played a demo of that in stores on Dreamcast before, and I don't have it on Dreamcast, but I actually had the Nintendo 64 version of Ready to Rumble Round 2 growing up. And even that version, even the Nintendo 64, I remember that looking really impressive for its time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, demo discs are awesome. Dreamcast Magazine had demo discs. It had, I want to say like 8 or 9 of them, but it always gets confusing because, and maybe I'll cover, I don't want to get too into demo discs. I could talk about demo discs all day. The Generator 1 and 2 did not actually lead into the Dreamcast Magazine demo discs. Dreamcast Magazine never really had a Volume 1. Their Volume 1 was actually a disc that you would use on your home computer, and it would have just video clips. I believe I own it. But then after that, they did their own Volume 2, which was a playable disc, and then it went 3, 4, 5, 6. And the last issue of Official Dreamcast Magazine, which had Spider-Man on the cover, did not come with a demo disc, but it did come with a letter telling you demo discs were no longer being included, but they were going to look at new ways to include them, and then the magazine folded. So, interesting moment. And honestly, it was kind of the end of demo discs after that. PlayStation 2 had their, I guess, fair share. But after that generation, demo discs kind of went away. I don't really remember PlayStation 3 or definitely not 4 having
PlayStation 3,
them.
believe it or not, actually did have a few demo discs, but I mean like a very, very few. Like I think there was a Gran Turismo Prologue demo disc at one point. You could download it, but there was also a disc. And Netflix actually had demo discs for both the PlayStation 3, or not even demos. Like Netflix actually sent out discs to subscribers for both PS3 and Wii with their own Netflix app that you could use, because they actually needed some more time to prepare a version that you could download.
That's interesting.
And then when the download version came up, I believe it was an improved version, so they wouldn't allow you to actually use the discs anymore. I might still have my PS3 Netflix disc, actually.
That would
somewhere.
be. I have to look into that. So let's round out our top 10. Give us. I'm going to set you up here. I'm not just going to say.
Actually, I do have one thing that I was
go.
just thinking about earlier.
This is your number 10. This is it.
Yeah, This is it. This is it. This is it. So when I finally got my Dreamcast, that's when I started going crazy buying the games. Because at the time, remember, this is 2009 when I got my Dreamcast. there was a lot of games that were really, really cheap during that time. And I remember even Yahoo News, they did an article I saw once that that was talking about how a lot of people who were gaming on the cheap by getting old games, and they highlighted Dreamcast because this was right after the economic crisis that George W. Bush left us with, and they were mentioning that a lot of people were getting Dreamcasts, and they were getting a lot of Dreamcast games, including people who didn't actually have the Dreamcast when it was still new. They were getting into that and actually discovering the games at the time. And so that's what I was doing, because like this was my chance to finally see what I was missing out on way back then when the hype was real. So like I remember one of the first games I got was Skies of Arcadia, which I got complete on Amazon for about $60, and I was so enraptured with that game. I was playing it like almost 8 hours a day. It was crazy. And when I eventually beat it, I loved the. I was like compelled to go online immediately and buy the GameCube version of the game. So I have both versions. And like I was on Amazon all the time, just scooping up whatever Dreamcast games I could find. I was getting games that I'd never even heard of back then, like Outrigger and Sports Jam, just because I thought it was so cool that Sega made an online shooter, an online third person shooter, and I had no idea. No one I knew had that game. No one talked about it. I thought it was amazingly cool though when I saw it. And then Sports Jam, I like that one too. I was especially amazed to find out that and Outrigger were actually arcade games. I don't know if the arcade versions came out in the US, probably not. But like yeah, and then that was also when I was finding out that there was actually an indie scene surrounding the Dreamcast. So nowadays you see this all the time where people make new games for retired game consoles. There's like 5 on the top of my head that are on Kickstarter right now, actually. None of them are Dreamcast games, though. But that was when a game called Wind and Water Puzzle Battles came out.
I love that game.
I do, too. I bought that game straight away as soon as I found out about it. And then I found out there were a couple that came out before that. I didn't really get any of those because they weren't available at the time. But like in the years since, if I found out there was a Dreamcast game, a new one coming out, no matter what it was, I would see if it looked interesting and I would buy it. Even when we started seeing games that were just Neo Geo ports, like Breakers and Gonryu, because I'm actually a Neo Geo fan as well, so I saw no problem just getting those as soon as I could. So like at the time there was this gold mine of Dreamcast software to discover. And like of course I got a couple of the games that I'd known about for years, like Shenmue. I got that at one point. And yeah, that was like that's one of my favorite things about collecting retro games is the discovery aspect of all this. And not to mention, like, I was 19 years old at the time, in 2009. And this was only a few years after I'd gotten my first job and started making my own income. Because I didn't actually really make any money before that. So one of the things I realized was back then was like, whoa, wait a minute, I can go online and buy games from my old game systems that I didn't have. So I could do that, and I could like discover games that I'd missed out on back then that I'd never really forgotten about, and like finally have my chance to play them. And like I knew you could emulate them too. I'd emulated a few Dreamcast games before this, but there was always something special about just actually getting the games. Not to mention, if I actually go out of my way to pay money for a game, even if I don't pay that much, I'm more compelled to actually play the game than if I were to download the game. Because I find when you do that,
Yeah.
you don't appreciate the game all as well because getting it is too easy. It's hard to
Right.
appreciate something that's on
There-
tap, right?
Yeah, I mean, I many times with those older consoles, I just open a folder and I have the whole library of ROMs. And to have everything there to pick from sounds great, but sometimes just to have it all there kind of makes them lose their uniqueness, their specialness, just because you're not either being restricted to your own library, so you're kind of forcing yourself to play a game a little bit more and appreciate it more because you either spent a bit of money on it, or because you might as well try it. It's sitting there.
Or like even if you didn't spend money, like if you won it in a contest or if a friend gave it to you,
Right,
like you have to do something to get it.
right,
You have to jump through some kind of hoop
right.
because then
And
you're gonna make time for that game.
Right, and the graphic designer in me too always finds that there's a level of experience in holding the box art, looking through the manual, which, I mean, manuals don't really exist anymore. But like, for example, I mean, it's not Dreamcast, but here I have Maximum Carnage. If you just play the ROM of this, that is what it is. But picking this up, you're like, oh, it's like getting a brand new comic book. This is cool. Look at that art. You open it up. Oh, check this out. Red. This looks so cool. It's a red Sega Genesis cartridge.
Red game cartridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, cool. There's like a poster. And then you get the instruction manual and you're like, all right, let's see what this is all about. This is cool. So, but you lose all of that when you're just playing something on your like Dream Pie or emulated. Nothing wrong with doing that, but there's always something special about having the real thing. And for me, I've kept my game library relatively small. I'm not a completionist. I mean, I showed that picture at the beginning here of my library. It's a little over half of the American Dreamcast library there that I own.
Whoa!
But
Almost dropped something. Sorry.
that's okay. Yeah. So it is what it is. But I'm a person who really enjoys, all those things. So
And another funny thing I almost forgot to bring up. When I was getting Dreamcast games back then, like it was super easy to find sealed games all the time that were dirt cheap.
Yep.
All kinds of games. I think my copy of Outrigger that I bought was actually a sealed game.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's a really funny story for you. For like almost a decade ever since then, I had people like practically giving me sealed copies of Choo Choo Rocket and Space Channel 5.
Right.
And I had a hard time giving those away, right? For a long time, this might even still be true to it. Probably not, actually. We're in post-pandemic years. But for the longest time, I remember it was super easy to get a sealed copy of either of those games for $15 or less. And I went out to a lot of local retro game swap meets, and I brought many of those copies of Choo Choo Rocket and Space Channel 5 with me, trying to sell them off. Most of the time, nobody wanted them.
Yep.
And it's not because nobody liked the games. Like, these are two of the first games you might think of when you think the Dreamcast greatest hits.
Right.
But like they're everywhere. So like everyone's probably already got them at that point. So like even for like less than $10, it's a hard sell for someone.
Absolutely.
And I was only finally able to offload those games in 2019. And it's a good thing I did because there were no swap meets last year, obviously.
Right. Right. Well, the collecting scene definitely has changed, but the Dreamcast.
Good luck finding a Dreamcast game for a reasonable price on Amazon today.
Exactly. But we have what we had. We have our memories, and I just really want to thank you for coming on to share your memories of the Sega Dreamcast. It was fun running through kind of I don't know, it wasn't a top 10, it was just a 10. There were 10 things, and
I mean,
it was a lot of fun.
People have been talking. I'm really thankful that you invited me here too. It's great just whizzing on the Dreamcast every anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's the greatest console to ever get less than it really deserved, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I
And
try to do I've years ago I would do live streams. I haven't done much for the Dreamcast on the anniversary outside of like touching the console and being like happy birthday. But at least this year I wanted to commemorate it somehow. So again, thank you so much for coming on. Where again people can follow you. What's your Twitter handle? Let's throw that out there.
Well, you're not going to see much activity there, but my Twitter handle for the Elk Plates and Paints channel is at ElkPNP, because I tried to write Elk Plays and Paints, but I ran out of space. I'm gonna admit I'm lazy with social media, except for Discord, so you're not gonna see me post there. If you're in the SEGAbits Discord, you'll see me around. I'm Big Elk over there.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, in SEGAbits Discord, you can find the link on SEGAbits.com. We have a little box up in the corner. Join us over there. It's a lot of fun to chat live with like-minded or unlike-minded Sega fans. We try to keep things civil in our disagreements. But I think one thing we can all agree on is that the Sega Dreamcast, fantastic console, happy 22 years. So as we close things out, we're going to play some outro music. This is from the I Have a Dreamcast EP, LP. Anyway, it was a recording done on, I believe, the 9th anniversary of the Dreamcast. It was in a very limited print run. Gaga Man knows all about it. It's something we kind of connected on. I think it's probably one of the first times I actually met him. So as that plays over the outro, I invite people in the comments section, leave your Dreamcast memories. I'll throw them up on the screen as they come in. So again, thank you for watching or listening. You can check us out at SEGAbits.com and also Patreon.com/SEGAbits. Again, we have Marvel vs. Capcom 2 coming up on Sega Talk next week. And in 2 weeks, I might do another one of these. I've been doing these every other week on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Central. So stay tuned to see when the next live show is. Again, Elk, thank you so much for joining me. And to all of you, I don't know, keep the dream alive. Bye.
Mwah. Good night, everybody.
I have a Sega Dreamcast with 2 controllers for my idle hands to play, and a new VMU to save my progress all of the way. So just sit back now. I have a sad tale to tell of a console dying in a sort of tragic kind. It was a short 18 months, but it was great. All those nights I stayed up late in a Power Stone rage, a res replay. Code Veronica was my date on a Friday night or weekend straight. A crazy taxi to take me away. 'Cause it is still thinking. It is still thinking today, and it is still dreaming. It is still dreaming anyway, and it was always thinking. It was always thinking anyway, and I am still dreaming. I am still dreaming today. Space Channel 5